All right, good afternoon. Welcome to the November 2018 Human Resources Committee meeting here this Tuesday, November 13th, starting a little later than usual because of a couple special board meetings. First order of business is the staffing report. There's a little more action I know we talked about last month due to just listing the hiring of various coaches and activity coordinators. Any questions from Member Oswald? I think you were.
My question is about the 1/6 overload for split classes and why it's included in extracurricular or certified co-curricular stuff. I'm trying to find a good example.
Mike's walk, I think, isn't it?
Well, there's a couple of them. Like Julia Sampson. Well, why do we include that in co-curricular? That seems instructional to me.
Okay. Hang on. Okay, yeah, actually the split classrooms are a stipend and they're identified as such, not in the co-curricular schedule, but in the regular part of the teacher's contract, but it's a stipend that is paid for having a split classroom.
Well, I understand it's a stipend, but I also don't understand it as being entirely voluntary from assignments that principals make, assigning classrooms that you're going to teach a split class and here's your stipend. I mean, is there any ability for those teachers to say, no, I don't want a split classroom?
Pretty much.
Okay.
I mean, you're looking for special skills and people willing to do a split classroom. They either apply for them, or if it's offered in the building, it is a principal may approach somebody and talk to them about their skills and abilities in doing a split classroom, and others that have had experience on that. But
okay. Well, I just think that gets lost among football coaches and soccer coaches and volleyball coaches. I wish that could be a separate category so we could understand exactly the impact of split classrooms.
You were throwing me off by the 1/6 overload, so you were thinking maybe that's a different area for it, or?
Well, I don't know if it's just a separate category altogether, but to be hidden amongst sports, it's difficult to pull those out and understand that there are split classrooms and how many.
Okay.
And I think that the struggles of teaching a split classroom are worth more than the stipend.
Member Trinka.
Yeah, I have a couple questions. Anyone know what popcorn jungle volleyball is?
Is that in one of the intramurals?
Yeah.
I don't.
I think maybe we could have a demonstration of that at one of our next meetings. Yeah. I'm not sure if that fits Bart's search criteria. Just a couple of points of information. How do we set our extracurricular pay grades, and are they the same between East and Denfeld?
Yeah, the pay grades, but that's a really good question, because we did have some discussion about that actually at one of the co-curricular meetings that we had. All the co-curricular schedules are the same for all the schools that are offered, and the items are there. There are some exceptions. For instance, we might have at one point in time we had 2 girls hockey teams, and now we have a combined team, so there's only really one stipend for it. The stipend itself didn't change, but it only goes to one group. But I think the other thing that I wanted to explain on here that is sort of maybe a little bit misleading, and I've seen more of a pattern of this. For instance, on the basketball ones, if we start off right with Anthony Adamczak, that's on here, some of the coaches are willing to say, instead of having 100% stipend, I'm taking this and we're kind of divvying it up amongst the assistant coaches and the 9th grade coaches. The total of the stipends for all those areas don't go over what they're allotted, but they tend to redistribute those. They might do that in order to have 2 assistant coaches instead of 1 assistant coach. but they end up splitting those stipends up, and I've seen more and more of that. In fact, we started having some discussions on that.
Okay, thank you. And then my second question is around on page 7, the overloads. Are those all included in our staffing budgets at the start of the year?
The cost itself would be covered in our staffing budgets. An explanation on the overloads. If you look at, a teacher will normally teach 5 classes, and if you take their salary and divide it 5 ways, that is basically what they get for each section. On a 1/6 overload, you're taking their annual salary, you divide it 6 ways, and that 1/6 is the additional that they get. So in reality, it's for one section of instruction, it's actually a little bit less than what they would get if they were doing a normal section. But that is, they can't, a full overload is essentially like a 0.2, but it's a little bit less because it's 1/6. It's not a 1/5. And so that point is budgeted in. So 0.2 is one class all year in a secondary building, and that is budgeted.
Thank you.
Member Lafleur.
Yeah, back to the question about the coaches and sharing their stipend. Do you think it's often because of the sizes of their teams that they choose to have, more than one, like an assistant coach or that? I think of my daughter who is just in cross country at East and 120 kids and growing, and so I think they had 2 coaches and 1 assistant, or yeah.
We did make some arrangements in some of those larger no-cut sports, and I'm trying to think of all the ones, but cross country is one of them, that there's sort of a set number of what a regular team would look like, and if we had X amount of number of participants beyond that, taking into account their activity fees and that, we can add assistant coaches, but essentially, hopefully, the activity fees and that end up paying for that additional coaching. What I think in some of the other sports is having additional coaches on hand. I hear, I'm just trying to think if it's swimming, where there might be, and it's all in the same pool, but track is another one. So track, where there might be a number of events taking place, and having the availability of coaches within those areas that are helping within those different events.
Member Oswald.
Back to the certified temporary increase with Mike Swak. How can he's on here twice with 2 1/6 overloads. How does that work?
That is correct.
How does that work?
Technically, between their in how do you want to say this? Technically, in their 8-hour day, there's a 1 hour that is used to call the 6th assignment, and then there's also their prep time. So the maximum anybody could have technically in an 8-hour day are 2 1/6 overloads. In Mike's case, the one overload is for in his position that he does on the work experience, and the other overload is a contract stipend that is the quality steering committee, basically not chair but coordinator. Yeah.
And then under certified leaves, I'm just interested, one of the positions is E-squared enrichment. Any idea what that is?
Yes. This was a topic at the agenda setting. It's basically the new title for gifted and talented, and we came up with the feeling that gifted and talented was maybe an old school term, and wanted the original title.
Does it stand for anything, E-squared?
Gifted and talented.
There's no E and E. It's just it's G and T equals E. Okay.
Extension and enrichment,
Okay.
or enrichment and extension.
Got it.
Those 2 words. Not
Okay.
sure which order.
Thank you.
Assistant Superintendent Horton.
Just to follow up on the coaching stipends and how those get processed out, that's a pretty common practice actually in school districts that depending how a coach wants to run their system, and the track was a good example, you may want to bring on different people to do more individual things. So some coaches may want to practice like 9th and 10th graders together or 10th grade with the varsity, but someone who wants to split off for some reason and platoon that would give them the freedom to do that. So there's a variety of factors that go in that, but really kind of gives our coaches the power to run their programs the way that they want to.
And again, those splits are voluntary on the coach's standpoint. They're not made to do that. So.
All right. Member Lafleur-Kemp?
Yeah, I just had one question. I saw that the Spanish immersion program had a resignation in October, and has that person been replaced?
Yes, they have.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, seeing no further questions, we'll move on to action items, and we have 3 new policies plus an old policy we would be deleting. So the first one we are looking at had our first reading of last month was policy 401, which would replace policy 4010, equal employment opportunity. Any member Oswald?
Under 2A, where it's all underlined for the verbiage that we included, it says about the third line, we'll use approved traditional and non-traditional methods. Do we have a definition of what's traditional and what's non-traditional?
The term was used actually in another recruiting statement that we had, and it was left open basically for not having a standard that says we're only going to do this to recruit. So things that may come along down the line that we might want to use as a school district, we can use non-traditional.
Is there a better word than non-traditional, perhaps maybe innovative methods?
I'm not married to it.
It makes it seem not very inclusive, I guess. I mean, I would like to use any and all available methods or something like that, because I think that those 2 words view there's a separate distinction in separate categories, and I don't want to limit ourselves in order to doing one or the other or both or defending how we did it. If we say any and all or traditional and innovative or something different than because if I could just form my words, it would help.
I tend to like that term innovative.
Because the way I read that, traditional and non-traditional, it means any way we can think of.
Are we any? Oh,
Are we good with the change to innovative? Okay. Are your lights about something?
Yeah, just a comment about something else that.
Well, I was just going to comment on the any and all is just as vague as non-traditional and traditional. I mean, sometimes then when you go to innovative, I don't mind that word, but it's not, I think people understand traditional and non-traditional, really. I mean, we do. Innovative might be that we're not going to do anything that's more traditional, we're just going to do innovative, and then that seems rather like, how will I know if you're not going to go, I don't know, but I don't mind traditional and non-traditional. Innovative is fine too, but traditional and innovative, is that what you're going to go? Or just innovative? Just innovative.
No, I suggested replacing non-traditional with innovative.
Member Lafleur-Kemp?
Yeah, I just wanted to comment. I appreciated that this policy directed questions to the senior human resource manager in human resources. I don't think the old policy had that in there. So just a comment that I was glad that was added.
Superintendent Grotza.
Yeah, I actually had a wordy question too. It's approved. And my question is, approved by whom?
Actually, in one of our other policies that we'll be bringing up in the future, there is an approved staffing policy talks about interviews and screening and those types of things.
So the answer is the board
Yeah.
in other policy.
And could we, rather than using adjectives, could we just say,
Use approved methods.
yeah, or, yeah,
Eliminate the adjectives entirely.
So, okay, using approved methods is what you're saying.
Yeah. Member Oswald, what do you think? Eliminates the
Yeah.
issue.
All right, are we clear on language so that we're ready to go for a second reading next Tuesday? Everybody good? All right, moving on to other policies. Policy 402, disability non-discrimination policy, excuse me. And then, seeing no lights or questions, 405, veterans preference policy revised. Member Oswald.
I just want to make sure that the inclusion of teaching and non-licensed positions on page 14 complies with the union contracts that are out there. And is this language included in the union contracts?
The union contracts on the non-certified side doesn't delineate anything in reference to veterans' preferences.
Is this something that they could take issue with then, or that they'd want to do an MOU about?
No, usually the contracts generally have a statement of such things as promotional capabilities within that union. They would also have guidelines such as how long we have to post positions, but there is nothing in regard to the screening and scoring. That's a management right.
Okay.
Seeing no further questions, there are no informational items, nothing listed as future HR items. Just wanted to point out that I do believe we will be doing the midway point evaluation of the superintendent sometime in the next couple of months. I think December, January sometime. So let's make sure that's on our agenda and that we're getting a chance to sit down and look at that.
Would you like that added as a future item?
Yeah, I mean,
Or other future items?
yeah, as a technicality, that's nice, but just want to make sure we're not missing it. Thank you. Superintendent.
I just wanted to make a note that the midterm evaluation was going to be not a public evaluation.
Okay.
Not that I have a problem with that, but that's what I believe the language is.
Fair. Duly noted.
So not added.
So then don't list it if that's the case. Yep. Sorry about that.
Well, I still think we could include it as a future item to say, hey, we are doing this. We're not going to do it publicly, but it is going to happen. We're sharing.
We can share.
I can share. I can share.
I think let's just make sure that it gets done, and however we acknowledge it publicly is fine with me, and we can discuss that. So, and that concludes the Human Resources Committee meeting. I will hand the microphone over to Member Trinka.
Thank you. So we'll kick off the Business Committee meeting with a report out on our financials by our bright and shiny new CFO. Welcome. Peggy. Peggy, you thought you were off the hook.
So the financial reports that are in your packet are for the month of September, I believe. Your next monthly report will reflect, we should have the cash flow report added in there now. We've gone through our auditing process in October, and next month we'll be presenting to the board the full audit in the December meeting. But right now, their field work has been completed, so we've been able to roll balances forward. So we'll be able to do the cash flow report starting next month.
Okay. Any questions on any of the financials? Our new CFO is still here, so that's a good sign. Okay. Seeing none. Oh, let's see. Sorry, I'm having issues with my computer. Moving on to, where are we here? I keep thinking of your light on. Thank you. Thanks, Member Oswald. I just had a request, I believe it's on page 18 under the financial pieces. When we're titling reports, if we could not use acronyms in the title, I think that would be helpful. It's easy to get lost in our world of acronyms. That'd be great. I would love that if you would go over that. Thank you.
On page 17 is the report that you normally have received, I think, in the past. And while I love that report, I think there's a lot of different pieces of information that don't necessarily flow together to find that one number that I think maybe board members want to see or appreciate. And working with Kateri and Mars, we spent many hours trying to decide how we could maybe transition to a pupil report that could make sense to the board and to the public. And so on page 18, I just would like to walk over a couple of the columns so that you could kind of better understand the process that the district goes through to determine pupil counts. So the first column where you see the 11,241, that's the number of files that are created between July 1 and the beginning of November. So that's how many records are being created through this point. So to get to the amount of students that matter to us, it takes over 11,000 files. So that's kids going in and out, kids that are maybe transient, kids that are going from different buildings may have more than one file. So we have over 11,000. By the end of the year, it'll be close to 15,000. The unique student count is how many kids are being served. So how many bodies. The reality of those kids are not every kid turns into a full, what we call an adjusted ADM or average daily membership. So a child that starts at the first day of school and ends at the last day of school, we call them a 1.0 ADM. So that's that ADM number. So a child that doesn't stay through the whole year is less than one. So we will have more kids than how many kids we're going to get paid for. So the unique student count is going to be right now estimated at over 9,200 to get us to then the current entrants, which are the students currently enrolled as of today. So we've already had kids who have come and gone. So we're down to the 8,600 enrollments. But now to get us to the number that a finance person will care about is that adjusted ADM or average daily membership, which is going to drive our funding. We go all the way down to 8,170, which is our current estimate. So the budget you can see is at 8,178, so we're fairly close to where the beginning of the year budget was. But in talking with Kateri and talking through the Mars process, spring is where we're going to see a lot of volatility, especially in those upper level grades, 11th and 12th grade, due to several factors. So we'll be projecting a lower number as we get into December and January. And then once we get into spring, that number is probably going to be even lower. So we're trying to tell you where we are as of right now, but the reality is we have to plan for in the future that we're going to see a lower ADM count. And then the other thing I just wanted to mention were the entrance per ADM or the ADM per student, those numbers at the end, which interestingly, when you look at, say, grade 12, it takes 2.22 12th graders to earn one ADM. So that means we have a lot of kids not earning that full ADM.
So when you get, and then go all the way up to the top, those early childhood and VPK and the pre-kindergartners, they're also not generating a full 1.0, even though we're serving them a lot of hours throughout the year, they're not generating that full 1.0. So it takes 2 kids to generate that 1 ADM. So when you think of the kids and the bodies, we are serving a lot more kids than what that number is that we get paid off of. And I think I love pupil counts, and there's so many. We haven't even talked about resident, we haven't talked about served, there's so many, but this is really an important number for us to be thinking about and targeting as far as the budget goes. And so I hope it's okay that we start transitioning away from that original report into this report. I did share a different report with the superintendent and business manager that I didn't want to throw everything at you guys at the first business committee, but we've got some great charts to kind of show you that that arch of how we're serving so many more kids than we generate money for. And so I think that's an important relationship that we have to look at. But the good news is, looking at our projections from where we think we're on the mark right now, but we're going to have to be prepared. And as we're starting to revise budgets for 19 and start preparing for 20, I think the reality is we've got that volatility in the spring. We also have the 3-year average where you can see 16-17, 17-18, which is almost final, and then projected 19. So we had a low year in 16-17, which was the 8,066. Then we bumped up, and from what I understand from the history was we had a growth of kindergartners who came in as 6-year-olds. They were held back, and so it makes sense that 17 was lower, and then 18 jumped up because there were kids that could have been kindergartners in 17 and came in 18, so we saw that. And you can kind of see that we broke it down here by grade level, so you can see that growth. And then again, the volatility in the high school level is where we're going to see those changes as well. So even though this is where we're here right now, in the next coming months, we're going to be talking about an adjusted pupil count that will most likely be a little bit lower than what we're seeing right now. That said, if we can see those enrollments changing and those bodies coming in, we might see some leveling off too. So did that help?
That's really helpful. And I would like to encourage you to continue to, and I know we had talked about this in previous business committee meetings, but to find different ways to help us with data visualization, not just for us, but also for certainly for the community. I think that was a very helpful explanation. Thank you.
Great.
All right. And welcome. We're happy to have you here.
Thank you.
Moving on to fundraisers. Any questions there? Those beef sticks still continue to be a big hit.
It's a lot of money.
It's a lot of money. Any questions there? All right. The deed grant. Could you just, Superintendent or somebody, could you just give us kind of a basic walkthrough of what this opportunity is and what it means for the district? I think it's a fantastic example of a partnership between the school district and the city. Would you mind just giving us, give us just a high-level overview of this, please?
I wish that we had Patty Fleege here to be able to tell us more about this, because this is actually a program that's in our adult basic education program, and so I haven't had a lot of exposure to what this is, but we have had partnerships with the Community Action Duluth, with several other agencies to provide our training programs, like a GED program that goes to community action and does programming there. And so it is it's a strong partnership to get diplomas to as many people as we can.
Member Leffler-Kemp?
Yeah, just on that vein, maybe it would be great, being March will be the Construct Tomorrow event, like in early part of the year, to have just a report by Patty and other staff who are involved with any of our workforce development and programs like that.
Moving on to the contract with the Duluth Heritage Sports Center, I have a few questions about that, of course. When we're talking about the usage of Heritage, is that equal usage between the teams? I don't know who I'm looking at to answer this question.
The contract would allow for equal usage, whether they have the same number of teams and the same amount of time, I'm not sure. Do you know, do they have a JV this year at both schools? They do.
I don't know right now. I think they're in the process. The season's just kind of getting going here, so I don't think we have all that yet. But yeah, it would be open. The athletic directors would work with the teams and make sure that gets divvied out. So obviously, boys and girls are going to get equal opportunity to use ice time.
That was my next question. And then who ultimately pays? Is that the district pays for all of that usage at Heritage?
The district does pay for it. Part of it is through the activity fees. Hockey is the most expensive sport that we have. And so fees do pay for part of that, and the district would cover it also out of gate fees and other revenue sources.
Okay. I have two more questions, and I'll get to you, Member Oswald. On page 7 of that agreement, it talks about damages, and that's all has to be paid for out of the district or by the district. Is that correct? It's on page 47 of the packet. Okay.
Ms. Erickson, would you be able to answer that one?
So this one is just in regards to if something happens to the facility,
Yep.
Then we're not they're not going to charge us.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
I must have misread that.
Yep.
Got it. And then that's my last question. Member Oswald?
I'm just looking for any idea when like elementary schools have skate days and use hours at Heritage, does that apply under this contract or do they have to pay for that separately? Does it count against our hours that we already pay for?
I don't know the answer to youth.
I believe if the hours aren't used by the teams, then we can still use that time for other activities. The question is, will they have extra time? Our ADs believe that they will use all of the time with the teams this year, and so that would not come into play, but it could if we had leftover time.
Has it come into play in past years?
I don't know the answer to that.
Okay.
I know that there was a year that we did not have a JV team at one of the schools, and so there was extra time. How it was used, I'm not aware.
I'm currently looking at the Heritage Center ice tracking that we do for the 2017-18, and we do have information on there, but there's nothing that speaks to the use of elementary, so that's not something that we are currently tracking. So I don't know if that's happening, but it's definitely not something that we are tracking as part of the overall hours, which I don't want to assume anything, but it's not in the report, so.
I'm just speaking to, elementary schools take field trips and do ice skating, and that has happened across the district for the most part, on occasion. So might be something that would be nice to know if they're able to use that for our excess hours, if we have any, or if they have to pay for it, because that would increase the ability for schools to take field trips.
Great. Moving on to resolutions, we have the acceptance of donations, and as always, really, there's a long list of donors this month, and so a big thank you to all of those who have donated to the different schools and to the district. Any discussion? Okay.
The Families in Transition program had a website developed. Is there any particular reason why we had to have an outside source do that? Or is it just something that they volunteered to do and, hey, why not? So
Sorry, I should say it at the mic. And I can't remember how it started. Kathy, do you know more about that?
In the discussions that we had, it was spurned by them just as an opportunity for people to find it, and they had gotten some immediate response, so they found that it was a very positive opportunity for them. So they saw it as a pathway to get funding easier.
I believe it's with canalpark.com, and they had originally started with promotion sometime during last year where if you bought a certain item, that so much would be donated to families in transition or homeless youth, and they wanted a way to further that, and so we started discussions about that, and then we were in the process of creating the new website, and so they offered to create a specific website for that.
Do they still have an active part of our new website?
Nope.
They're not included in the district website at all? They're not included in the district website at all?
You mean their control of it, or
No, that, every, like, Families in Transition is a program we have, would it?
Oh, yeah, it just has a link to that other page.
Okay. And is there something specific that they're needing to use a GoFundMe, or is it just to support general need?
To support general need.
Okay.
Okay. The next resolution, the authorized bank account signer. Nothing major there. The next one around the designation of identified official with authority for MDE external user access recertification system. Great title. Sounds like something Chair Kirby would make me read. D, resolution authorizing the issuance of full-term refunding certificates of participation. So could we get an update, Superintendent, on both 2018A and the Series 2018, where we're at with those?
Yes, you can, and I'm going to pass you right off to Ms. Erickson.
We worked with PMA Financial over the phone over the last week or so. Rates are not favorable. The expected return is down to about $524,000 versus the original, which was closer to $800,000 several months ago. So our recommendation would be to continue to table this refunding at this time until we find more favorable outcomes.
And so how often are we planning on revisiting that discussion?
The election could have an impact at some point. We're not sure when. I can't say that it's going to be in the next week or even the next month, but both statewide, nationally, and internationally, there are some changes that are coming, and talking with financial advisors. The one thing about refunding is there's often a window that pops open relatively short, and you find those opportunities and you kind of have to be prepared and ready to go. So I think it's worthwhile to keep looking, and then your financial advisors will contact you and say, okay, we're seeing a window and then we'd like to move forward. So at this time it's not as favorable as it looks, but in the next weeks or months we could see something change.
So do you have, I know that when we had the presentation a couple of months ago, we had just a surface level discussion around this, but do we have kind of a minimum threshold for what we're looking at in terms of, like, can you remind us what that is?
So in speaking with financial advisors, that's your call as a board to come up with that number. The recommendation for a $40 million refunding, which is quite a lot of bonds, favorably should be, I think $1 million is what we should be hoping for. That would be ideal, but again, the market conditions are going to impact, and that's why we do count on the financial advisors to say, midterm or long-term, if we're never going to see that number, we would come back to you and say, would a lower threshold make sense to you? I think at the time, back in the spring, when you were first looking at it, you were close to $1 million, and then it was looking good, but the timing and getting all of the things done, and then the market changed, and it went down into the low 800s, went down into 700s, and now we're at 524. It's really, we're seeing that month by month. So if that uptick happens, I think, again, it would be the recommendation coming from the board, what number you feel comfortable with. In speaking with some of the financial advisors, in the better climates, a $40 million refunding should get you between $2 and $3 million, but the market just isn't there, so it becomes a number that you would feel comfortable. That said, $1 million put on over 10 years is $100,000 on the levy, which equates to about $1.50 to a taxpayer. So even though we're saving that over the spread of a levy, it just doesn't have that impact that we would hope. So the more we can save, but as we wait, you pay off another years of a bond, so then you have less to refund. So there's the give and take of that. So hopefully in the next month or so, and especially probably right after the holidays when we can get that better market trend for 2019, we would come back with a recommendation.
Okay, thank you. Member Oswald?
So the district's position is to not recommend passing this?
Correct.
So I would hope that on the agenda under 5D and E, the recommendation be changed to reflect that, because they both say it is recommended that we approve it.
Right. I would echo that. That's
you.
part of why I was really confused.
Oh, thank you. We talked about it in our business meeting that we were going to table it, and it must just not have gotten.
Good catch. Thanks, Member Oswald. Member Lofeld?
My other question would be is if you come across a window, can the chair of our committee, of this committee, okay going forward, or does it have to be a board? And is there planning in place where it could be a voice or an email, so that if the window opens and this board has to approve it, what's the policy for getting us to the table to make that move before that window closes down again?
It's a great question, and even though we say window and it seems like a short period of time, a refunding takes weeks to actually put together. So we would for sure come to you to make sure that you're aware that there's a situation coming, and we would lock down with a financial advisor, but your board approval could be most likely during a window of a board meeting. But we would be working directly with the financial advisors to secure getting all those things set up so that you could approve that.
Great, thank you. And thanks in advance for making those changes on this, so we're all on the same page on Tuesday. Great. Moving on to informational items. Any questions or comments on the expenditure contracts? I might have one. Hold on. I have a couple questions, of course. The first one, the critical questioning, is that only happening at Denfeld, or are educators at East going to be participating in that Courageous Conversations training as well?
At this point, Denfeld has not been a part of that process either. It's been our elementary Title I schools that have gone through that. And so that was the first group that we identified to work with, was Title I schools. They went to the summit in Philadelphia with us. And then we have a follow-up training where we'll be inviting their continuous improvement teams to do a training called Beyond Diversity. And so our CITs will work with a Courageous Conversations trainer along with their admin team, and going through a process of kind of peeling back those layers of systemic racism and really taking those things and looking to apply that to their continuous improvement process as they're looking on how to use their compensatory education funds and developing interventions for students.
So I'm speaking specifically about the expenditure, this $5,000 with Michael Walker. And I understand that Denfeld is using some of their compensatory education dollars to pay for that. But I'm just asking if there are going to be any teachers from East or anywhere else that will be participating in that training, or is that only Denfeld staff?
I can't really speak for Principal Sconyers on that. I believe this might have been the trainer that she had on her staff development day. I'm not 100% sure though.
That was a speaker that came to their August training date.
Okay.
So that was specific to Denfeld.
Okay. And then kind of a secondary piece on that.
I have a quick question on that. Sorry to interrupt. But the contract is for October 15th through June 30th for this particular person, so it wasn't an August thing.
Or is that for the one with?
That's for Michael Walker.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
If it was on the 29th, I actually was in attendance for a portion of it. But I don't want to say for sure that that was Michael Walker. I don't recall if that was the two gentlemen, one of the gentlemen's name. There was two there. So I'd have to check with her to get back to you on that.
Okay. And then do we, and I apologize if I missed this somewhere, do we have a list of how the schools are using their comp ed dollars?
I believe it's on the end of this report.
That's right. That's right. Thank you. It's been a long day. Okay.
Can I make a quick question? Just on the Michael Walker, if you research, I was there too, and the contract might be because he probably will come back at some key points and do some other things, but if you look at his website, and he's out of Minneapolis, he's an incredible resource for Denfeld to use, and I think that, the fact that our leadership, our administration, our principals are reaching out to people, experts that can come in and help and teach and inspire and motivate is really a great thing. He is a very impressive young man.
So that was Michael Walker who was there on the 28th. Okay, yeah. And there was some consistent themes with, when we talked about things that we were doing with Courageous Conversations, there were some overlapping themes with that as well. Even though different speakers, some similar concepts were present in that conversation.
And so that was kind of going to be my question, is if this is truly under the brand of Courageous Conversations, or is this just a title that they picked to advocate supporting the black male? But if this is truly part of Courageous Conversations training, are they going to benefit as much as if they started at the beginning and work through it? Or are you able to pick pieces of it and it still be effective?
That was a site-driven decision to bring him in, so it was not connected directly with Courageous Conversations and Pacific Education Group. I can't speak to his training or background as to what he has had or not had, so I would have to get more information and learn more about that. But just in listening to him present, there was clear crossover in themes. In terms of the scope and sequence, I don't know. That would be a Principal Sconyers question, but I can follow up with that and get some more information for you. Yep.
Yeah, were all staff at that training that was held the end of August, or was it just teaching staff? Just curious. At Denfeld.
That was a Denfeld-specific training on October 29th.
Oh, okay. October 29th. Okay.
Yep.
And that would have been certified staff unless they chose to ask their non-certified staff.
Okay, I have one other quick question around those expenditure contracts. On page 76, the agreement with Charlie Applestein. Under dates of service, it says it should be deemed effective October 29th and remain in effect until October 29th. I'm guessing it's probably not an issue because it's already been signed and sealed, delivered, right? But, okay. And Braswell?
I just have a general comment that I really do appreciate having the source code inserted at the bottom of each contract. I really like that, and thank you. I'm imagining that's you're doing, Ms. Erickson? No? I haven't seen it before, and I think it's vital in order for us to keep track as long as we know codes.
Any other discussion around the expenditure contracts? No cost contracts? Any discussion there? My only comment was, I don't know if we want to get updated, and maybe this doesn't matter, but updated names on some of these, like the one with CSS is addressed to our former CFO. Maybe it doesn't matter. Member Oswald.
I have a question about the concurrent enrollment CITS courses. My question is about accreditation, and we only needed to fill these out because the programs we're using are not accredited. So is that going to, or not currently? I guess I'm saying accredited because I've read it, but I don't know if that's exactly the language that it refers to. Maybe. Let me find it here. Anyway, we only have to fill it out because they're not NACEP accredited post-secondary institutions. And the ones we're filling out are for Fond du Lac Tribal and Community College, and they're not accredited by that institution or in the process of accreditation. So my question is about the viability of their college credit that they're earning for the course. Because we all know we want to have accredited credits from accredited institutions in order to have them transferable.
With the WITC articulation?
No, it's with the MDE one after that.
Oh.
There's one for Duluth East and for Denfeld, both for using Fond du Lac Tribal and Community College. Which on page 98, it lists the accredited colleges, and Fond du Lac isn't one of them, and that's the reason you have to fill this out in order to get reimbursement for the aid.
I can remember looking at these and going over them, and now it's been a minute, and I have to relook at it.
Essentially, my question is are the students that are participating in these courses going to have the same ability to transfer their college credit as other people?
As with any PSCO or CITS courses, it's really dependent on where they choose to go. If they continue at Lake Superior College, then it's very likely that they will be able to continue those, or if they go to another state university. If they go out of state or they go to a private college, then it may come into play. I know from personal experience, my kids graduated with 40 college credits through CITS and PSEO, a combination of them. And while they had credits, it did not count towards their program for one of our kids, and for the other one, all but like 3 credits counted. So it really depends on the programs that they're going into, the schools that they're going to. It's not a yes or no answer for any credits that come from anywhere.
Well, right, but I would like to know if there's less of a chance, because we know that Fond du Lac tribal and community colleges not accredited already under the program for PSEO by MDE. And because I know students are completely unaware of those kinds of details, and I don't know if many of them would have, some of them may have not have chosen to take CITS if they knew it would have been that much harder to get college credit from an unaccredited college that they knew probably wouldn't transfer.
We'll look further into it.
Thank you. Member Lofeld?
Having spent a lot of times in the PowerPoint presentations that our counselors do with our seniors and our juniors as they approach, there is a lot of conversation. There's a lot of direction given to students by our counseling staff as to which credits are going to be more favorably accepted and at what campuses. But you're right. We have, great opportunity to offer CITS classes, and it all depends on the college that's willing to offer that curriculum to us. So if Fond du Lac is able to offer the Duluth system to put in some CITS classes, we tend to accept that, or we have because we've passed it as a board. But it is known by our counseling staff that some of those CITS credits that are then granted by Fond du Lac will not be accepted at some other. It's much stronger of a CITS offering if UWS or UMD offers, if you think about that, a 4-year campus offering a CITS credit probably has a little bit more acceptance across. But our students do know where the credits are coming from. It's listed right on the presentations that they get. But it doesn't hit the pavement until your own child has the credit from Fond du Lac that you think is going to give them credit at UMD for their math or their English, and it does not. Not all the time.
That's helpful background. Thank you.
I'm not trying to state anything against, when you graduate and when you go to college. I'm talking about on our side that we're offering them a CITS class that may or may not be accredited in the first place. Mm-hmm. That's where I believe we have some responsibility to understand and communicate.
Yeah, I think that'll be really helpful information to get from the superintendent.
And maybe Mr. Horton, as our education committee goes forward, it wouldn't be a bad presentation somewhere down the road where our counselors come in and talk about where the CITS credits, how that helps our students go further and what that means and what each college that we approve offer our kids credits. What does that look like? I don't know. It could be a presentation at our education committee if we thought it was worth or just a handout or a PowerPoint that we can go over ourselves.
I think it is important, though, that we're using district dollars at the schools that will offer the most bang for our buck, both as a district, but then also certainly for our students as well. So I think that's a really good point, Member Oswald. Thank you. Any other discussion there? All right, moving on to the Facilities Management and Capital Project Status Report. Mr. Spooner, do you have anything of note that you would like to bring to our attention?
It was relatively normal, October, although we had the good fortune of the superintendent finalizing the sale of the Hartley property. So that was a great deal, great accomplishment. Still progressing on the Rockridge lease that should be completed shortly. We've done what we need to do and we're waiting for them to get back to us. Other than that, I'm just scanning the report right now. It was a pretty normal month, just typical. If anybody has any questions, I'd be glad to answer, but I don't really have anything out of the norm that happened.
Member Oswald?
Your last bullet point under your very first category about working with HR to review and update position descriptions, are you including union membership in those discussions or leadership?
Yes, Linda from HR has reached out to the union and we're working on getting dates when we can all meet right now.
Thank you.
All right. Next, moving on to sale properties, we are happy that that sale went through to the city. Thank you, the superintendent, for your work on that. Any other questions or discussion around property sale updates? Member Oswald?
The signage that Mr. Fulmer is asking about, do we not have signs for sale on the land that we want to sell?
There hasn't been, because of where the property is and the access to it, but it sounds like they needed to do a little clearing of some brush and taking care of the grass before they did that. And winter's here now, and so I don't know if you've talked to him about how far they got with that.
We have completed the brush clearing, although right now with winter it's pretty tough to put signs up, but the location of the property in Hartley isn't visible from Woodland. It's not a very well-traveled road, so signage probably isn't going to be really effective. Greg wasn't 100% sure he even wanted to install signage there.
And have we notified the neighbors that this property is for sale too?
We've been in conversation with some of the neighbors for the past several months as we've gone through this process with the city. I know that they were present when the city had some discussion about the property as well. And so we haven't, nor are we really required to give out a notice that the property's for sale, although it's been pretty well discussed by the neighborhood.
So is there an option for neighbors to buy chunks of that property, or are we looking to sell it as a whole?
I believe they're looking to sell it as a whole piece.
Okay.
To a developer.
So if anyone's watching and wants to buy a beautiful piece of property, give us a call. Okay, the comp ed spending update, and I apologize, I didn't see it in my email, but I don't know if anybody else in their board packet, if it just looks like gobbledygook.
It did before I downloaded it again.
Okay, mine isn't, so I hope that if people are looking at this, what mine looks like.
Oh, yeah, that's what it looked like.
If people are looking at it at home, I hope that's not a problem for them, but.
There was an error when it was first uploaded, so if you refresh, you should get something you can read.
I pulled it up out of my email, but thank you for that.
I can make a comment, general comment.
Go ahead.
While you're catching up. I really like this report. What I would request, though, is that another line be added to say how each spending category affects equity or affects kids that are not reaching their potential, as that's what the money is meant for, minus people costs. I mean, I understand by law there's certain categories that this money can be spent on, but some of these categories I have to question, but I don't know what it involves, such as why stipends and subs are important, or why monitor support is, how that's affecting achievement. Those kinds of things. And it may well be that it's an okay expenditure. It just makes me question it. So I would really like staff to be able to tell us how it's accountable, to hold them accountable.
Any other discussion on this report? Member Oswald?
I have more comments, I guess. I understand that materials are unallocated money. That a lot of it appears that a number of schools have some leftover to cover during and needs during the year. I guess I just have line item questions mostly, but I guess I can get those answered privately. I guess the last thing I'm looking at is elementary club supplies. I'd like to know how club supplies help kids and why that's included as an expense but not to just pick on one school over another. It's clear that some schools that got the least amount of money used the vast majority of their money to pay for staff, which is within the scope of the law. But I'd still like to know what kind of teachers or interventionists were bought with that money, so we know that kids are getting help. There's interesting categories that I've come up with, and I just really like some further explanation as to why they chose that to spend their money on.
Thank you. I have a quick question too. Do we anticipate that for those that say materials are unallocated, that all of the unallocated resources will be spent by the end of the year? Is there a date by which they have to have spent them, and if not, it goes into a pool or something?
Compensatory education funds need to be spent within the fiscal year that they're allocated, and so by the end of the year, it all needs to be spent. So by the end of the year, it will be allocated.
Okay.
Okay,
thank you. Member Lofeld?
I just want to go back to and appreciate the list of where the comp ed dollars go, and I am very supportive that the way that our leadership has spent their comp ed monies is going to be spot on for what we need. I think that when they ask for materials, it's probably for materials for a number of things. I spend my whole day in schools, and they're using it in after-school programming where we are specifically targeting students that might be needing support, and so that materials is for that club that might meet. And I think that interventionists, if you look at their job description in our human resource, you'll find that they're hired to specifically meet the needs of the achievement gap and to work specifically and targeted by support with the teachers to go in there. So I'm really appreciative of how our staff has so early in the year given us this data. And I think that if we want more specific line by line, I think that's an over ask. And I also would say that maybe we would get some more of this answered maybe in like March or April when some data comes back. So if we see improvement in our areas that they have used their comp ed monies for, then that would supply us with what, that they used it effectively. But for us to ask for line by line, I wouldn't support that as a board member. So I would not want to give my vote to having that take more time.
Peggy, did you want to add something?
Yeah, I just wanted to point out that a lot of these plans were taken from plans that the principals submitted last spring, and they're in the process right now of updating their plans, so we're just now getting in new information, so at a later date there will be more detailed information available. So now that school has started and they have a little better idea, especially schools that didn't have any discretionary funding in the past. This is all something new for them, so they've been kind of adjusting their plans as they go along.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful. Did you have something you wanted to add, Superintendent?
Yes, please. I did want to just kind of do a little review and say, compensatory education funds are generated by students who receive free or reduced price lunch, but are intended for students who are underperforming. And so there's just a couple of different kinds of language going on here. So they're generated by one group, they're intended for another group, and then the word equity is mixed in. And I just want to be clear about how these funds are to be used. There's 12 different categories spelled out in the statute. It is pretty flexible funding, and as we're going to having more of the comp ed at our sites, it changes how we are doing our ongoing funding, because generally speaking with the budget we would work from the most restricted funds and make sure that we are using those on applicable expenditures, and then we would work through the budget towards our least restricted funds that could be with most flexibility. So with the majority of this money being at the sites, it's being used differently than it has been, and so we're continuing to work with the principals, do a lot more further education on, yes, this is an appropriate way to use these funds, these are not, and so we are continuing to review their plans, and as expenditures go through, making sure that they are coded appropriately.
Thank you. Member Leffler-Kemp.
Yeah, thank you, Peggy, for explaining that, kind of where the process is at with this and with the principals and the plans that they did last spring. I'm wondering, though, for example, Denfeld materials are unallocated $55,859. Is there a point, if they have to use it by the end of the year, that they will be making a decision on that? Or is there a good process in place? So I've had grants before where we've tried to spend out, and I guess I just want to make sure it's used appropriately. And then secondly, to my question is just, as we start the budget process in January or in February, will we have more background on this to be thinking about the budget district-wide?
Unlike some other funding sources, Comp Ed cannot be carried over. And so we would be helping them to identify things that were in their budget to be able to allocate those expenses to allowable expenses, and then not use some other less restrictive funding source, if that makes sense.
And do we have just to reiterate what Member Leffler-Kemp said, do we have a date by which all of that needs to be identified so you're not panic spending 2 weeks before?
We usually like to have them finalize their plans by March to make sure that they can get the materials that they need or allocate other funding for teachers that may free up some less restricted funds.
Great, thank you. Member Oswald?
I just wanted to clarify my comments because not every teacher hired is an interventionist, and so I'd like to know the difference between if an interventionist was hired or if it was a teacher. I would also like to understand if, say, Congdon wants to spend $3,000 on transportation, I want to know how transportation is helping kids that are underperforming. It's maybe entirely reasonable, or maybe it's just, hey, not. Maybe it's after-school enrichment clubs. I mean, we don't know. So it's those kinds of things that I think that could be questionable that I would like further explanation on. That's plain and simple. And the principals already have to justify using this and are being coached on how to spend it correctly. So if they can name it, that means it's being spent correctly.
All right, any other discussion on that? Oh, sorry, Member Gorham.
It's okay, I'm hiding over here. I appreciate that this is the Comp Ed process is new with more resources in some buildings than traditionally, and as we do that process, it's going to evolve. However, I think one thing that came up in the community conversation and from the board direction was to, and is required by statute, I believe, is to show the use of those funds to the community. A report of that should be available. And so I think with the generic information we got there about, I have faith in our principals and our administration that those things are being utilized correctly, but what I think the community wants to see is a clear picture of what's happening there. And I think that is, if I understood the statute correctly, that is what is outlined there, and that is what the expectation is. And so as we evolve and grow with this process, I hope we can provide that information to our community as they requested last year. And I think that's important, as maybe missing in this conversation. And I understand you're probably working towards that.
Yep, we currently just did we just pulled in all of our principals who are part of they're either receiving targeted support or comprehensive support from the state. The current RCI process that we used is a really good process, and the Regional Centers of Excellence has said how great it is and how far we are ahead. But there are some nuances. There's a few things that are different about that. So we met to compare and contrast the two. So we sat down and we read our RCI. We looked at some state documents that they're currently using and sharing out with districts. And we said, oh, what does this have? What does this not have? And we went through a process, and that group determined that they wanted to move forward with the state documents, which are going to be in line and meet all of our compliance requirements. And so as we go through that process, and we're going to be we're still in conversation about what that'll look like for everybody, but we can be embedding those different pieces and stuff. So to your point, yeah, it's very much a process. We are going through that, and we're continuing to learn things as we go too. So we got some great professional development from the Regional Centers of Excellence about ESSA, and kind of refresh that in our minds and what that means, and also what it means for other schools in our district, and how that could potentially affect them in the future. So we are pulling some of that work together.
Member Lafferkin.
Yeah, I had a specific question. I am always very interested in anything to do with our community schools, and so I did notice that at Myers-Wilkins, they paid for their community schools coordinator, but at Lincoln Park and Denfeld, it wasn't listed under there, and I'm just kind of wanting to make sure all the schools are supporting their coordinator, and so I'm just curious if you could tell me why that isn't showing up.
Some of our schools have several sources of discretionary funding, while others have just one. And we also invested as a district into what we called the equity investment of $150,000, and that was used to pay for the coordinators at Denfeld and Lincoln. And Myers-Wilkins has several different sources of funding, and they chose to put it into this category.
All right. Next is school board strategic planning. There's nothing there. I know that's something that all of us are very interested in, so it's the last thing on but there was no documentation there. So is that just a reminder that we're going to be doing that? Chair Kirby?
It was an opportunity for people to decide how they wanted to do it. It's an open question. What do people want? So this is the place to discuss it.
As we had discussion and agenda setting, I said that however Melinda or Jackie or I can support you in this process, if there's proposals you want or people that you want us to reach out to for you, we are more than happy to do that and support you and how you'd like to do this. But we'd need some direction on what you have in mind, and if you want us to help, or if you want to do it on your own, or who you'd like there, who you want to facilitate it by. We need something to go on.
Sure. Member Lafferkin.
Yeah, I know that the School Board Association does do strategic planning with school boards, or helps them walk through a process. So I guess I'd suggest we start with saying what resources or suggestions they have.
I think that I would agree that we can start there, but I would actually like to see us use somebody other, the complexities of school districts. I don't know that they necessarily need to be still in education. I think there's a lot of very talented planners who can work with what it is that that we're bringing to the table. But I guess for me, what I would like to see come out of this is a really hearty conversation that comes out with strategic objectives that are measurable, that we can use as kind of a guidepost as we move forward as school board members. So I don't know if it would be worth issuing an RFP. And so I don't know if there are other districts, superintendent, who have issued RFPs specifically for strategic planning. So I think we could probably even find one online and pull it and then add in some of what our goals and objectives are. But that might be a way to attract some people who, and that would allow MSBA to at least submit a bid if they wanted to. But I don't know if that's a normal process or if, but that's what I would be looking for out of this.
Generally, with services like this, we ask others for suggestions or recommendations, and then we ask for proposals. Mm-hmm. And we haven't put out specifically for an RFP for these types of services. Doesn't mean it couldn't be done, but it's just.
Is that something you could put on your superintendent's discussion forum? Is to ask your colleagues who they've used?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you, Member Lofald.
I just want to agree that I would like to spend time as a board looking at planning, strategic. I actually think before we do any asking someone to come and help us, that we actually sit down just with ourselves and decide what it is strategic planning we want. Because that will make a decision whether the School Board Association is really the agency we want to use or not. And before we I don't mind asking our superintendent to give us some options as to, didn't you send us an email a while back about another potential candidate that could help us with this process? And was that involved with the MSBA?
No, that was Bruce Miles from the Big River Group. He often works with school boards and school districts and other organizations on strategic planning, and he was at the superintendent conference this fall and heard me talking about wanting to do strategic planning, and so he sent a proposal that he said he would be happy to alter and amend however the board would like to, if that's something you're interested in. But that's one that you can look at as we gather others as well.
Chair Kirby?
How long are you, well, not you, but since you're interested, how long are you looking at this? A weekend, a week, a day, a month? I mean, it can take a long time. I don't see it as something happening in an afternoon.
No, I don't.
So that's what I'd be looking for some context in that respect too.
And part of me thinks, going back to what you said too, Member Lofald, part of me thinks we look to the planners to give us some guidance on that because they're the experts in this arena. I mean, I do strategic planning with healthcare organizations and nonprofits, so I know that, my process takes a day and a half, but a small rural hospital is very different than ISD 709. So I would look to expertise from the planners on that too, to say, and to show us some examples of what their end product has been too, so we can say, okay, yes, this is what we're looking for, this is not what we're looking for. We want something that's hard and fast, or we want something that's soft and colorful, I don't know, but.
I too have questions about kind of the scope or the direction of where the board is headed in doing its own strategic planning, whether it's I would think if it's coming from the school board, it's going to be pretty high level and not the kind of action plan of how this gets implemented, or if it is kind of what is the involvement of staff in this? What is the involvement of community? When we did our past strategic plan for the whole district, it was an 18-month process with a couple thousand people and $50,000 budget to really develop a strategic plan. Or is this really, we're going to come up with a few goals as a district, that talks about financial plan for the district. I have so many questions.
Member Lafferkent.
Yeah, just for discussion purposes, the training that we did in the end of April of this year, I think it was more of a board training. We had new board members coming together, and we took that little survey, and that was really, in my eyes, not strategic planning. It was board training and establishing our working relationships as a new board and a young board. Again, I'm not bought that we need to use the School Board Association to do the actual planning, but part of this discussion, I guess, I would hope would be advice from the School Board Association on different ways maybe school districts of our size have done strategic planning, and we do have some experts there that have worked with the 300-plus school districts across Minnesota, and so I'd be looking for them for helping us even to think about what we want to do, and kind of going back to what Member Wilfold said. I don't know if we all agree with what we want to do and what that would look like, and we all come with different experiences in strategic planning that probably look very different. So I think we still need to kind of figure it out before we jump into looking for companies to work with. So
I think that point's really well taken, and maybe we can use the next month to your question, Chair Kirby, and to you, Superintendent Grunsteth, for us all to do our due diligence, including maybe gathering some resources from the School Board Association so that we can help to frame our expectations and our ask. And if we have a little bit more of that information, then we can come back next month and really have a more informed and educated discussion at the business committee meeting around what this would look like. So are we asking you, Superintendent, to reach out to MSBA, or is that something that we should do?
Well, I guess one question that's been kind of brought up, are we looking for strategies the board is going to use to attack, or not attack, but deal with district policies, or are we looking for a district strategy? And the district strategy, I think, should concern community and everybody else. How we as a board strategize what our goals are for dealing with those it can be different. So we're looking at board strategies or district strategies?
I see it being board strategies because that's what we have the purview over. Member Gorham?
Yeah, I think district strategies are pretty much set. The board strategy that I would see most beneficial to address, I have a lot of thoughts, but is some strategic thinking financially, long term. Not 1 year at a time like we do right now. That's important and we got to do it. And can we put a plan in place for 10 years that's accountable to the goals that we've set for the academic achievement for our students, and be accountable to annually looking at how that money is going in there and really getting into some results-based accountability. Are we bending the curve and being accountable like that? And, to do it on a deeper level, we have to take time to invest and think about it. And that, to me, is board-level work. Mm-hmm. Because we're setting that budget. We're making the call. We know what the goal is. How are we going to get there? Let's look out 10 years. What we got a nice chunk of money to work with for the next 10 years. But we still got questions. We got facilities questions. We got technology questions. I don't need to go on.
Well said. Member Oswald?
I understand, just like you echoed, that MSBA has tons of resources that we can utilize in handouts and knowledge and that kind of stuff. I don't think they need to necessarily lead the charge, but they have documentation of what school boards do and how they do it, and everybody's different, and we need to find something that works for us. My goal into going this is critically looking at how we do our business as a board, because is it the most effective way? Is there better ways? How we approve things, how our meeting schedules and agenda settings agenda setting meetings that that's where some knowledge is conveyed that we don't always get to. So I know that's an issue that is common with many board members. So I also don't want to spend a lot of money. We don't have a lot of money to spend on this. So anything that can give us a framework to work in, but not necessarily a baby step walk us through that framework. I think we're intelligent individuals and been a part of strategic planning enough to know how to do that and get from A to B if somebody shows us the direction we need to go.
Superintendent?
I have another question now. You have two separate things going on. So you've got the committee on committees, and you've got the strategic plan conversation. And I feel like they just got mixed into one. Are those two things, or are they one thing?
I think they're two.
I think they're two, but the strategic plan for the board might inform the committee structure. So I know Chair Kirby, I saw your email about who's on that committee. And so maybe it makes some sense to hold off. But that's not my call, obviously. But
I can call MSBA and see what resources they have. We'll start there. I think personally I'd like to go ahead with the other committee and get that going. We just keep putting things off, and there's a lot of information gathering that has to be done there, and I think that can be started.
Member Lefferkamp?
Yeah, I was just going to say I was confused too, so thank you for clarifying that. But in the discussions that Chair Kirby had with me about this other committee on the committee, we really thought that just at least starting the process, and really the first few months would be a lot of information gathering and research. And yes, it would start with the School Board Association as one source for that committee. I think it can continue to be part of the discussion on strategic planning. We're not going to have a lot of meetings before the first of the year.
Member Lofeld?
So then I'd say if we have, and I know that for maybe the general public, they don't know what we're talking about when we talk about this committee, but we have just recently made a decision to just look at how we handle committees and what our committees look like, and there's a subcommittee working on that. So could the other 3 or 4 board members, 3 of you, be a small committee investigating strategic potential ways we could in the next few months decide how we're going to, what our strategic would be. Because I just think we just need some time to talk about how we all probably have a goal of what we would like to see happen in this year or 2 years, or for me, I have 4 years or 3 years, 3.5 years on the board. What would we want to see? What does our district look like from what we can control? And I love that conversation. If it's called strategic, I guess it's called strategic. I mean, I just want more opportunity to talk with my fellow board members on goals and visions and where we're at and how we make decisions. I don't know if that's called strategic but that I would love a subcommittee that will do a month worth of work. And I know it's holiday time, but I want that subcommittee on the committee structure to work really hard so that we have good information in another 6 weeks.
Member Gorham?
I don't want to hand off the baton, but in a way we're the elected representatives of the community to work with administration on achieving the district's goals. I'd love to hear from the cabinet members what might be some potentially helpful strategic things the board could be thinking about to support furthering the mission of Duluth Public Schools. I think you probably would all have some great ideas.
And I have to leave because I'm going with my debaters to a tournament at 7.
Good luck at your debate tournament. So if I'm understanding correctly, we're going to spend the month doing some work and some research, and then we'll have another discussion about this next month. Great. Okay. Future, including cabinet members, potentially. Future items in December, we'll be talking about the audit, as you brought up earlier. It's always a party for a conversation. And then the final levy approval, which we discussed earlier today. So it's on here for future items.
It was asked that we, and kind of going along with the long-term financial plan, just lay out again how this money is planned for and how it will be used.
Great, thank you. And ongoing policy updates. With that, Chair Kirby, did you have anything else, or your light's just on? Okay.
No.
We'll adjourn the business committee meeting. Thank you all.